welcome to today's On This Day in Tudor History video. I'm Claire Ridgway, founder of the Tudor Society and Anne Boleyn Files websites. I'm also author of several history books. Today I'm going to rewind and take you all the way back to 1559. On this day in Tudor history, the 14th of January 1559, the eve of her coronation, Queen Elizabeth I processed from the Tower of London to Westminster, Westminster Abbey being where she was going to be crowned the next day. She processed in a cloth of gold covered litter carried by 2 mules. Now, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the main parts and pageants of the procession, going from Fenchurch onwards. And we've actually got a primary source that tells us all about the procession. It's called the Queen Majesty's Passage through the City of London to Westminster the day before her coronation. They really liked long titles in those days. I always find them really, really funny. And this book, obviously isn't the original manuscript. It's a facsimile. Let me just show you. It comes with all kinds of bits. It's a facsimile of the original book. So they've got photos of the original publication. And it is a record of her procession, and I just love this book. I'm one of those people that likes pop-up books and that, so I just love this last page, which is a map. Got to go that way so you can see a map of the route. There's a red line showing the route that the procession took. I've got to actually put it back in there. So it is a wonderful read. If you're interested in Queen Elizabeth, then try and get a hold of this book. I think I got it from either Amazon or Abe Books. But my information is from this because it is a primary source. So, at Fenchurch, Queen Elizabeth I was given her first formal greeting by the city. That's the City of London. This was in the form of an oration in English verse, and it was given by a boy. She then processed onwards, and we come to the first main pageant, which was at Gracechurch Street. And this pageant referred to Elizabeth's family tree, her genealogy, her Tudor roots, and the history of the House of Tudor. The people, the common people, the people of London that were lining the streets for this procession and watching everything were reminded by this pageant that her namesake and grandmother, Elizabeth of York, had brought peace to the land by marrying Henry Tudor, King Henry VII, and by uniting the warring factions, the houses of York and Lancaster. And this pageant sort of played on that and made out that Elizabeth too, like her grandmother before her, would bring peace and unity to England. Then the procession moved on, and there was a pageant at Cornhill. This referred to Elizabeth's new government, and it said the pageant was all about her new government being upheld by 4 virtues, being true religion, love of subjects, wisdom and justice. And these virtues were displayed as treading on their contrary vices. So they were, they're putting them under thumb, treading down on superstition and ignorance, rebellion and insolence, folly and vainglory, and adulation and bribery. So it's talking about how, Elizabeth's new government is going to be wise, it's going to bring back the true religion, it's going to be loving of the people, it's going to be just, and it's going to get rid of superstition, vainglory, and all the bad things. It's going to be a brilliant new government. So it's great PR, this. At Sopes Lane, just beyond the Great Conduit in Cheapside, there was a pageant based on the New Testament Beatitudes. David Starkey talks about this pageant in his book Elizabeth. I'm just going to mention David Starkey's book for a minute because this is a wonderful book about Elizabeth's youth, her background, her youth, and the early years of her reign. And it talks about her coronation procession. And it talks about this pageant being based on the New Testament Beatitudes. And Starkey explains that the pageant applied the Beatitudes to Elizabeth's sufferings at the hands of her sister Mary I, who of course has gone down in history as Bloody Mary. And all these pageants are about how, Elizabeth's doing away with, everything that Mary stood for, bringing in a new government. This is a new start, a fresh start for England. And this pageant was talking about Elizabeth's sufferings at the hands of her sister Mary, because of course Mary did put Elizabeth into the Tower of London for her alleged involvement in Wyatt's rebellion. Then the procession moved on to the Little Conduit in Cheapside. One tableau here had time as its theme. Time's daughter Truth carried an English Bible labelled The Word of Truth, which Elizabeth's government was said to possess. There was also a second tableau at this same location, and this attacked Mary I's reign, contrasting a decayed Commonwealth on one craggy and barren hill to a flourishing Commonwealth symbolised by a fresh, green and beautiful hill. So this is all propaganda, isn't it? Mary's reign, look what Mary did to our country, and now we've got this fresh start with Elizabeth. We're heralding in this golden age, which of course is what Elizabeth is known for. Then at St Paul's School, the churchyard, a child delivered an oration in Latin. And at Ludgate, the Queen was received with a noise of instruments. Now we come to the fifth pageant, which was at the Conduit in Fleet Street. This pageant was more PR. It depicted Elizabeth as the famous biblical Deborah, the judge and restorer of the house of Israel, the woman who rescued Israel from Jabin, king of Canaan. Now, like Deborah, Elizabeth would actually reign over her people for over 40 years. So it was, it was a good comparison there. Next, we have Temple Bar, which was dressed finely with two images of Gog-Magog, the Albion, and Coronaeus, the Briton, two giants bigger in stature. And these giants were holding a tablet with verses written in Latin. I just would have loved to have seen this pageant, to see all these tableaus and to see these massive giants holding things. It must have been wonderful for the people of London. Elizabeth then departed Temple Bar and headed off towards Westminster. The shouting and crying of the people of London was described as similar to the noise of the ordnance which the Tower of London shot at her entrance into Tower Street earlier that day. That noisy it was. It just sounded like the ordnance that had been shot earlier. The procession ended at Westminster in readiness for Elizabeth's coronation ceremony the next day in Westminster Abbey. I can imagine that Elizabeth must have been very tired after processing through London, watching all of these pageants and tableaus, waving to her people, good PR and everything. Now, Elizabeth I's coronation procession was recorded for posterity in the manuscript that I talked about earlier as a pamphlet, The Queen Majesty's Passage, which of course has been reprinted today. That was printed on the 23rd of January 1559, If you're a Tudor Society member, you can actually see one of my Claire Chats video talks that I did on this primary source, this pamphlet, and also I go into more detail about Elizabeth's coronation procession. So I'll give you a link to that to watch that if you're a Tudor Society member. My Claire Chats videos, I do a talk every week on a Friday about some Tudor person or a Tudor history event or some Tudor topic, and that's one of those. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. You can subscribe to these videos by clicking on the button below, but I'll be back tomorrow with another On This Day in Tudor History. I'll see you then. Take care. Bye bye.